All this raises the question, should there be limits on satire? And is there a double standard among those who defend the magazine? I talked about that with a man with 3 decades of experience in journalism. Scott Libin is now with the University of Minnesota. I asked him if he thinks there should be restrictions.
Well, I don't think so. I think I have kind of an American bias on this. And, you know, the American position is that almost anything goes. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater, as the old axiom has it, and there are limits on communicating threats and things like that. But satire in our culture is actually a defense. And that doesn't mean that media organizations, for example, can't use their own editorial judgment, as in fact they do and should. I don't consider that, to use a term I've heard a few times over the past week, to be a form of self-censorship. I think editors and news managers are responsible for using their discretion to determine what their own community standards are.
As for the question about a double standard, consider this. Just in the past 24 hours, France announced it will crack down even more on hate speech and anti-Semitism. Laws against glorifying terrorism will be more strictly enforced. Police have already arrested more than 50 people for, in prosecutors' words, defending terrorism. Here's how Scott Libin responded to whether or not that's a double standard.
I think so. I have to say I don't understand French culture as well as people who've lived there and worked there, obviously. But to me, with what may be, sort of a simplistic view of it, from my perspective, if it's okay to ridicule people of one culture, one faith, it ought to be okay where others are involved. So I, based on what I know of it, do see a double standard there. And look, I respect the editorial discretion of people in different positions. I do think news managers and editors and publishers have to think about the safety of the people they employ. But I also think at a certain point, you have to make a decision based on the content and its relevance to the story and how essential it is to the reader's understanding or the viewer's understanding of the story. I see this week's cover published and broadcast in far more places than I saw some of the earlier published material from Charlie Hebdo, which I think was far more offensive to a greater number of people.
Scott Libin there joining us earlier from Minnesota.